everyone to LMDA's Conference 2021. My name is Brenda Muñoz, and I am the conference coordinator. Thank you all for your patience. This panel, Mexico City 2006, Mexico City 2021, and beyond, will be presented in English. But remember that we have oral simultaneous interpretation available through Web Switcher Pro. That's an app that you can all download on your phones or gadgets. And you can take a look at the token in our virtual hub under oral simultaneous interpretation. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Brenda Muñoz, soy coordinadora del Congreso LMDA 2021. Me da mucho gusto darles la bienvenida a este panel, Ciudad de México 2006, Ciudad de México 2021 y más allá. Este panel será presentado en inglés, pero recuerden que tenemos acceso a interpretación oral simultánea a través de Web Switcher Pro, una app que pueden descargar en sus teléfonos o en sus gadgets. Y pueden encontrar el token acceso en nuestro Virtual Hub debajo de interpretación oral simultánea. Now I will leave this panel to the all-stars of LMDA. So you guys, thank you very much for being here. And the panel is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda.
Brenda, my partner in this, Liz Engelman, and I would like to, we're grateful to you and your colleagues, as well as Martine, Ryan Moore, LMDA, obviously Hal Round involved, for allowing this to happen today. In many ways, I think what we want to do is to invite everyone to what really is a kind of reunion after 15, 16 years that Liz Engelman and I started. We had a sort of odd, quixotic notion about 15, 16 years ago, and Liz will share more of those thoughts, and a number of people will share memories of that event a little later on. But I think it started with a notion that was primarily about curiosity on our part. Our organization, Literary Managers and Dramaturgs of the Americas, which was founded in the mid-1980s, was originally Literary Managers and Dramaturgs of the America, and then became Literary Managers and Dramaturgs of the Americas. And at a certain point, I think we began to feel a little shabby about that. We felt that we needed to extend the notion of what that might be. And part of that was our not a colonialist gesture, surely, not at all. But it was about a kind of curiosity on our part and the need to find out about what was taking place in terms of how theater was being made beyond our southern borders. And so that discussions that we began to have, and largely Liz and I were having them, and many of our Canadian colleagues, gave me the courage to write a letter to a friend of mine, a gifted playwright, director, producer, Sabina Berman. And in that letter, I asked her about what was taking place in terms of playwriting, dramaturgy, and what were the issues that were facing artists in the 21st century in Mexico and Central and South America. And in that letter, I literally had the courage or audacity to ask her the following. This may sound like a dream, Sabina, but I believe we need to begin to break down between our communities the not so invisible artistic borders that exist now. That began something. We had a series of letters, a series of exchanges, and I shared them also with my colleague, Liz Engelman. I, at the time, was the board president of LMDA. Liz was the incoming president of LMDA. And Liz had many initiatives in mind for the future of LMDA. And we, in June of 2004, decided to fly down to Mexico City and to meet with Sabina, which we did. At the same time, we saw Sabina's extraordinary production of extras, stones based on Marie Jones's Stones in Pockets, and met then also with a number of people, including the late Victor Hugo Rascon-Banda. And I'm sure Liz will talk later about that event, which was an amazing event that to this day still has an impact on me. We also had at that time Sylvia Pérez, who you will hear from a little later. We began to have plans at that time about a LMDA conference. We had lofty plans. And I always think about the first season of the HBO series Deadwood, based on that Wild Wild West town in South Dakota, that one of the founding fathers of that Brechtian mahogany of the high plains, what he once said is, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Well, our lofty plans, our initial lofty plans began to fall apart. And we ended up in this winter spring of 2006 planning a much more modified conference. But thanks to the Mexico City planners, we ended up being invited. And it was a gift, a tremendous gift at that time, especially under Mario Espinosa's direction, being invited to the Puerta de las Americas festival. I'm going to hold this up. I have my own props. I always have props if you're going to have a keynote address. And it was an extraordinary event. We were invited, 10 LMDA delegates from Canada and the United States. We were hosted over a 3-day period. I won't talk about it too much because my colleagues will talk about that specifically. But we flew down to Mexico City in 2006, and it was an extraordinary event. And again, we were treated so graciously. And I say that we began to plant some seeds. We were helped. We were guided. So many wonderful panels took place. I will tell one memory of so many other wonderful memories. This Yankee dramaturg who really was there on a mission of great curiosity, tried to lead a panel with 20 playwrights. And I went around the room in a circular way, asking, what their plays were about. And I had great curiosity. It was not a faux curiosity. But after about 5 of them politely, shared some things, I realized, having taught for many, many years at different places, realized they were merely being polite to this Yankee dramaturg. And I stopped and I said, I think this is enough. You're being very polite to me. I want to ask something else, because I knew it was on the eve of a major presidential election that was about to happen. And I asked the question, you as an artist, as a citizen of Mexico right now, in Mexico, what is it that you fear the most? Let's go around the room. And at that moment, that triggered a forest of hands. And everyone from their heart, their artistic heart, started to talk about what they feared as artists. And it was an amazing moment for me. And that was an incredible moment. And at the end of that 3 days, I confessed my shame as a United States citizen, and perhaps as an artist too, at the prospect of a wall that was beginning to go up. And now, 15 years later, we know in a more concrete way, unfortunately, at the prospect of a wall. And I reminded them that they cannot build a wall around our curiosity. They cannot prevent our imaginations from touching. And I'd like to believe that LMDA, and this LMDA conference today, June, reflects those of the Mexico conference that's happening in June 28, 29, that those imaginations continue to touch 15 years later. I'd now like to turn it over to my other colleagues to begin to introduce themselves one by one, and then also convey their memories of that time. Perhaps we could start. I know Conchi is going off to a rehearsal. Conchi, could we start with you? Conchi Leon. Hola, Conchi.
Hola, hola. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Yes,
I think my
please,
English is
Conchi.
not good. I think my English is not good enough, so I don't understand all that you say. Maybe Brenda can help us.
Yes, please, please. Hola, my old friend.
Hola, Brenda. ¿Estás ahí?
Hola, Conchi, aquí estoy, claro que sí.
Es que no entiendo todo. Si me puedes traducir un poquito.
Claro que sí. Y si te sientes más cómoda hablando en español, estoy segura que nuestros intérpretes podrán voltear todo el audio a inglés.
Sí, mejor.
Sí. Mark, do you want to repeat that question for Conchi? ¿Qué es lo que, what is what you guys most fear?
No. We're now moving into part two. It's just now we're in a section where we're all talking about sharing your memories of that period in 2006 when we were at the Puerta de las Americas Festival, and then after that, the results of that time. And for example, Liz and I saw, and the other delegates, the Mestiza Power, which was an amazing event. And subsequently to that, we moved Mestiza Power to Washington, D.C., to the Native American Museum there. And so
Okay.
any thought, memories?
It was a lot, but yes, I'll try my best to just say that in Spanish. Te están preguntando, Conchi, que si quieres contarnos un poco de tus experiencias de vuelta en 2006, cuando Mark y Liz estaban de visita en México, y también fueron a ver la presentación de Mestiza Power, en la que colaboraste con Silvia.
Sí, no recuerdo mucho porque ha pasado mucho tiempo y afortunadamente para eso hacemos teatro, como para ir recuperando la memoria. Lo que recuerdo es que siempre me asombra que gente de otro país se conecte con una obra como Mestiza Power, que es localista, que es como de una región muy particular, y que gente de otro país se interese o se conecte con la historia siempre me ha parecido como algo muy increíble prácticamente. Y lo que recuerdo de Mark y Lisa es que eran muy efusivos y muy como divertidos. Y sí recuerdo que fuimos a Washington junto con otros dramaturgos, y ahí leyeron la obra entre muchas mujeres, y eso fue muy emocionante para mí.
So Mark, I'll let you know what Conchi said. She said that it was very impressive to her to see that when people come from out of the country, they're always very impressed on how theater happens. Is cierto, Conchi? I think that for this one panel, it would be a great idea if everybody connects to our Web Switcher Pro with the token that is on for the panelists in our chat, for everyone else on our virtual hub. So you can speak on your own languages and we will all be able to understand, and then that way things will be smoother. Conchi, Silvia, si gustan descargar la aplicación Web Switcher Pro y agregar el token que les dejé en el chat, van a poder escuchar en sus idiomas a todo lo que digamos en el panel para que las cosas vayan más sencillas.
Okay.
But please continue. I'll just pop out. Mark, Bly, do you want to go on?
Yes, I don't know how to do the Web Switcher Pro, but I'll continue. So Sylvia, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I don't know. Sabina has already arrived. Maybe
Hello.
she would like to. Hola, Sabina. Maybe she
Hola.
would like to take it from here, and then I'll participate. If I don't know, what do you think, Mark?
Oh, is Sabina with us now? Oh, yes.
Yes. Here.
Hello, Sabina.
Hello.
Aloha. Please then.
Hello.
Yes, Sabina.
Hello. Nice to say hello to everybody.
See you again, Sabina. Can we just, maybe Sylvia,
to
because
see you,
Sabina, you just
Sabina.
entered.
Sabina, would you like to talk about your memories of that, of our getting together initially and with Victor Hugo Rascon Banda, you're putting together that dinner party for us that with Liz and everything that eventually led to our having that Puerto de las Americas festival event.
That's right. Well, my memories are a bit blurred because that happened 20 years ago, 23 years ago, something like that. But what I do remember is that you, Mark, we were talking, I'm not sure where, but we were talking about Mexican theater. And as Conchi says, it's always a good news to know that outside of Mexico, people are interested in our theater. And you told me you were really interested to meet not a few more, but many more Mexican playwrights. And I got really excited because you used the word globalization. In that time, globalization as a word started to sound around the globe. And some months before, the UNESCO, the section of the ONU, the UN organization, had asked me to write about globalization and culture. And I wrote an essay saying I had few hopes and that I thought the so-called globalization was an euphemism to continue the cultural imperialism of North America. They included my essay in a book in which other writers wrote about the situation in Africa, in Australia, in Asia, in Latin America, and they all said something very similar. The book started with my essay because it was the one which stated it very bluntly and from the title itself. I remember the title was Globalization as an Euphemism for Imperialism. Well, of course, we were not very happy that that was happening, and we were very pessimistic. With time, we saw that it was a well-founded pessimism, although later, with the internet, certainly a globalization has started to happen. Well, you asked me to introduce you to many playwrights, not only Carballido, which you already knew, not only Argüelles, not only Leñero, who were the generation of my teachers. So the first thing I did was introduce you to Rascon Banda. Victor Hugo was then the president of the SOGEM, the organization, the union of playwrights, really. And he was very kind and he was very accessible. I know you will tell us how much he helped to organize what happened later. And I myself organized a reunion at my home, at my apartment, for you and Liz that came to Mexico to meet these very new writers for you. They were unknown for you. So what happened is more than the ones that were invited came. I remember there was no place to sit. Everybody was cramped in the sofas. There were like 3 sofas and many chairs, and still there were very many people. And we drank wine and we talked, and each introduced himself or herself. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 guys were there talking about theater. And I didn't know how to invite them to say good night. And they didn't. They stayed for breakfast. I remember that. Cárcamo, which I would later direct, he as a actor, me as a director, was there. That's where I met him. And I know a lot of exciting things happened from there on, but I think it's for you and Liz, Mark, to tell that story.
Thank you, Sabina. It was a very special moment. It was a very special moment. Sylvia, I think could you pick up from there, because you were very key in moving it forward to the Puerta del Americas Festival, and also helping us make a strong connection to Conchi Leon. And you also were a translator of Mestiza Power. So why don't you be a bridge for us? Please, Sylvia, to share your memories.
Thank you, Mark. I am very pleased to be here, and I thank all of the LMDA and all the organization, Brenda, and all the people here at this conference. If you said the word, Mark, if I had another chance to live, I might be an engineer, because I love to build bridges. So you said the word bridge, and that's what I like. That I have done that very frequently as a playwright. Because I don't think I have time to become a real engineer, but I do this kind of bridge. I fostered, for example, a grant for Mexican playwrights at the Lark Theater used to be the Lark Theater Development Company from 2003 to 2006. And then during 5 years, I connected producers from all Latin America and Spain. And of course, this special relationship with LMDA. So yes, Victor Hugo Rascon, that was mentioned by Sabina, that I'm very pleased to see her here, was a very kind person, very generous. I miss him here because he passed away some years ago, and we miss him in the Mexican theater. And in 2006, I was close to him in Sohem, and he asked me to plan and coordinate the visit of some of the LMDA dramaturgs. And as you said, 10 delegates came. And so I was thinking, how could I make this visit more productive? And I imagined a place where people could come around and talk with different people. You could come around and talk with different people. And so I invited around 25, more or less, Mexican or more, I think there were more, Mexican directors and playwrights, companies. I remember among them Claudio Valdez Curi, Conchi Leon, of course, and many playwrights and directors. So I designed a gathering between LMDA dramaturgs, and I approached Mario Espinosa, who was directing FONCA, the National Fund for Arts, and Puerta de las Americas Festival that was in FONCA umbrella. So at the occasion, I had the pleasure to meet Brian Quirt, who was former president. At the time, I think he was the president of LMDA, Liz Engelman, too, and you, Mark Bly. And from this meeting, some very interesting relationships continue to develop. In 2007, I was invited to participate at the LMDA conference in Toronto. And in 2008, I was a guest speaker at the LMDA San Diego conference, in both talking of Mexican theater and my work as a playwright, because I have the sensation of that some of the Mexican playwrights are not known in the US and Canada, and also in Latin America. No? Always the names, the same names pop. So I tried to make connections in that way too. And as a bridge person, also in 2006, I connected Conchi Leon and her powerful play, Mestiza Power, with you, Marvly, as a dramaturg. I invited some of you, but you were interested in taking the play to the US, so I translated it. It was a very interesting trip, Conchi, because it is written in Spanish, but it is in Mayan too. It's the way people in Merida talk that I love. So it was very pleasurable translation. And as I know, it was taken to the Native American Museum in Washington. And time has passed by 20 years, as you said, and the relationships and exchanges have continued and have grown. In 2019, Brian Quirt invited me to the Banff Playwrights Lab, where I worked in my play Anteroom to Happiness. So, and in 2020 also, but the pandemic canceled the lab. And now in 2021, I had the pleasure to be part of the panel, The Creative Process at Home and Away in the online lab. And so after going to Canada in 2019, just before the burst of the pandemic, I built a bridge from Toronto to Mexico City, when Brian Quirt came to dictate a workshop on dramaturgy at the FITU Festival in UNAM, which is the international festival of universities theater. So I'm very happy to be reunited with you again to give account of the ongoing relationships in the art and the theater world. They say that I want to finish my participation with these thoughts. They say that one remembers instants, so that's why we forget the whole picture. But these little brilliant moments are the memories. So when I think of LMDA, I think of a happy exchange. And I want to share with you an instant of this time, no? So I would like you to close your eyes. If you close your eyes and then enter a big room where there are displayed 5 round tables, like for a party, with 10 people sat in each. We hear different languages. We hear murmuring. There are directors, playwrights, and dramaturgs. We can hear them talk about their work and projects, trying to connect with each other and to connect with the visitors. And then I see, I think Mark says they are trying to be polite. Well, we Mexicans tend to be polite, but if you talk more as you did, you will find who we are. And then I can see the future. When I looked at that room, and all these people talking and sharing, I can see the future, which is now taking us to share this moment. So now you can open your eyes. Thank you.
That was a wonderful bridge building moment and a wonderful weaving of the past, present, and future simultaneously, Sylvia. Thank you so much. You spoke of Brian. Perhaps we will ask Brian to share some of his memories as well. Brian Quirt.
Thanks so much, Mark. Sylvia, great to be back in a room with you today. Liz, also lovely to see you. Sabina and Conchi, thank you for joining us. And I'm currently the board chair. I was the president of LMDA at the time, and we made the journey to Mexico City 15 years ago, and now I'm the board chair. On behalf of the LMDA board and executive, I want to welcome all of you to this year's virtual LMDA conference, and also everyone who's watching. I want to welcome you to this 2 days of conference here, and the conference that will pick up in person in Mexico City in 2 weeks. So a huge welcome to all of you, and a thank you to Brenda and her team for getting us here today. I live in Toronto, as Sylvia has beautifully introduced me, so thank you. I live in Toronto, originally known as Toronto, and the ancestral caretakers and storytellers of these territories are the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Wendat nations. And I want to be sure to acknowledge and recognize the original peoples of this land and of the lands that you are currently living and working on as well, and offer our thoughts to them today. When I was thinking back on 2006 and the adventure in Mexico City, it was my first trip to Mexico City. But I also wanted to ask two of the other people who were on our exchange then, Madeline Oldham, who is now the dramaturg at the Berkeley Rep in California, and Vanessa Portis, who was a Canadian dramaturg and artistic director. And I invited both of them to send me a highlight or two. So I'm going to share those because they sort of broaden the picture just slightly. Madeline, like me, said she fell in love with Mexico City. It was her first visit too. And I think you can't underestimate the power of that few days that we spent there for those of us who are arriving for the first time. And while that is perhaps less relevant to the theater experience, our eyes were open to a remarkable city. And Madeline certainly expressed that. And Madeline's other most powerful memory, and she apologized that it was also not theater related, but was a concert we went to as part of the festival, one of the evenings of the Nortec Collective, which I also remember extremely vividly. It was a fantastic concert in a beautiful venue. It was really an amazing night. And for those of you not familiar with the Nortec Collective, I'm going to put it up, the link up in the chat if I can. I don't know if that's gone through. Anyway, Nortec Collective, worth looking up. And then Vanessa, I asked her, and she said her highlights included us all seeing Sabina's adaptation of Stones in His Pockets, which Vanessa called a breathtaking and audacious political statement of cultural resistance. And I think that's a wonderful and powerful way of capturing what we witnessed that night. Vanessa also mentioned the tour that Sylvia offered of Sylvia's wonderful neighborhood in Mexico City, and the canal tour that Sylvia and her partner took Vanessa on, which is something that I was hoping to do when LMDA returned to Mexico City. So I'm sorry to have missed that last year, Sylvia. So I'll take a rain check on that. And yes, exactly. Thank you. And then finally, Vanessa also called her time in Mexico City and a visit she and I did to the Anthropology Museum as you know, huge highlights for us, and called it the city a world wonder, and I would certainly concur. For me, meeting Sylvia was one of the highlights, and for all the reasons that Sylvia just outlined, that we have managed to sustain and build a partnership and a relationship over many years with a big gap in the middle, and which I think speaks to the challenge of sustaining these relationships that work across borders and across distance. How do we sustain them? How do we make them meaningful? How can we find other ways to invite one another to each other's programs, countries? Where do we find the funds to do that? How do we make them real? How do we sustain them? that is the huge work. And I don't have the answers. And for 10 years, I didn't have the answer because Sylvia and I didn't meet for almost 10 years. But here we are back again and connected through the Banff Playwrights Lab. I also loved meeting Boris Schoeman from Theatre La Capilla, who I was able to meet again last year. And again, not a deep connection, but a long-lasting one, and one that we've kept about these years about playwrights and about translations. The other two things that I wanted to flag were that huge gathering of Mexican playwrights and directors and our delegation. The thing that I walked away from was a huge and sudden awareness of the scope of Mexican playwriting and storytelling, and my realization of how little aware I was of it. And that is entirely my ignorance, but that is exactly why I wanted to be there. It reminded me, it told me, and introduced me to artists telling stories from across Mexico, particularly from the borderlands in the north. And their vantage point was particularly vivid, of course, as we all deal with borders, particularly that border. But the border between Canada and Mexico, of course, has this huge thing in the middle. And it is a huge barrier between the exchange between Canada and Mexico, and Canadian artists and Mexican artists. So the vantage point that those artists offered me opened my eyes to the breadth and beauty of Mexican playwriting. So thank you to Sylvia and others for organizing that. It made a huge difference and reminded me of how little I knew about the scene there. And then the last two things, the enormous number of Mexican theaters in the city. I was not aware of the breadth of the theater making world in Mexico City, and this trip illuminated that for me in the way that only being on the ground in a place can actually make it real. And that invited me into, in a very small way, into the ecology of that place, the theater ecology of it. And I walked away only knowing a little bit, and I learned a little bit more when I was there last year with Sylvia. I don't know nearly enough, but it made it real, and it proved yet again the value of being somewhere. And our digital contact and connection is invaluable. It allows us to do something like we're doing today. The being there, obviously, we know this makes the difference. So how do we sustain those? How do we make them happen? How do we find the funding and the opportunities for us to be in each other's landscapes, on each other's territories? That is what I walked away with and have worked a lot on over the last 15 years. So it has inspired a lot of my own work of trying to connect with artists in other countries, others beyond Mexico. And so thank you for the fuel that visit to Mexico City offered 15 years ago.
Thank you, Brian. There's so much there. Parenthetically, I don't want this to be lost. I think it was Sylvia who mentioned this. While we were there, we always, I think this is common to so many fields, we always want to be first. And that's just in human nature, perhaps. While we were there back in 2004, 2006, and we were in search of that creature dramaturg. We were looking for dramaturgs. We were looking for some kind of correspondence there. And as Brian, I think, so in such an elegant, articulate way has shared, we discovered so many other universes, so many theaters, so many playwrights, so many playwrights from so many areas outside of Mexico. And it was so eye-opening and so many sensory opening beyond the eyes. And while we were there, again, this is back to, there's not always a first. While we were there, other colleagues from the United States, the extraordinary artist John Eisner, artistic director of the Lark Theater Company, and Andrea Hebler, colleague of his, they were also there at the Puerto del Americas Festival. They were also there meeting artists. And they over the last 15, 16 years have had the occasion to develop many connections, many artists, many relationships. I know Sabina, for example, has had readings and work done there. They have continued to sustain many relationships, which is wonderful. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that. Yes, we were there, but we haven't always been able to do that. Brian's right. We need to continue to make these connections, continue to sustain them. Maybe this is another wake-up call for that. So thank you for mentioning that, Brian. All right, Liz, please share your memories.
Hi, everybody. The Sylvia future that we imagined with her 15 years ago in that room with our eyes closed. We're now here. And Sabina, I promise you we will not have this conversation until 4 in the morning, but I wish there was some wine. That was a beautiful evening. And I just want to say, I don't want to repeat anything you've said already, but I want to underscore the importance of relationships. I feel like all of this began because of relationships. You know, and as Mark said with curiosity, you know, two people having curiosity, having interests, and then based on those relationships, look who we were able to bring into our circle, and then the expanse and scale of what we were able to witness, as you said, Brian and Mark. You know, it started with relationships, and then we learned really not only about dramaturgs in Mexico. It was less about that. It was about how what theater making, what the theater culture, what our cultures both had as differences and find some things in common. But it was really more of, for me, about the spark that, for me, conversation and questioning, which is the heart of dramaturgy, led us to, which was conversations with more people in bigger rooms. And then to concerts and the productions, extras, and Mysteries of Power that you've all referenced, and that continued, and these relationships that have continued. So for me, it was really mostly about the importance of just starting and reaching out. And then just to say, what I valued so much was just an opportunity to have a conversation about playwriting, about theater making in a different culture. You know, we so at that point I felt we were so rarely doing that. The opportunities, you know, didn't arise, or we hadn't sought them in intentional ways. And so the joy of really just beginning it and sharing those conversations and talking about both theater making and dramaturgy and those intersections was joyful and powerful. And then also really figuring out, and this is going to be the bridge, I'm going to be the Sylvia bridge, next part of our conversation about the present, but really feeling like what I was getting from the playwrights in Mexico City in those days, this idea that publication of plays was almost as important in some ways as productions of plays in terms of exposure of work across a big country. And really that felt different from playwright experiences in the United States at the time. It was less about our playwrights having plays published and more about where will those plays get produced. And so the conversation around the importance of translation and dissemination of work was really eye-opening for me, that it was actually through a tangible book. And we left, as Mark has eloquently written in another article, we left with like so many books and CDs, like this is the way to show and share plays, you know, in lieu of production in some ways. And at the time, I felt where we couldn't help in the way in 2006, as I think maybe we're in a better position now in both LMDA as an organization, as a field as a whole, is at the time we didn't have a lot of Latinx dramaturgs in the LMDA fold at the time, and really in the field to be able to help with that translation from the US side of the border, in order to really try to, you know, we had the books, and then what can we do now? And I feel like 15, 16 years later, that's changed in both the field and our organization, and that we're way better poised in terms of the diversity organization and the languages our dramaturgs and playwrights now speak, and can communicate that there's possibly more connection and collaboration years later than there was then. And that excites me because I felt like there was a potential and a ball that was kind of dropped by the lack of diversity on our side, in our field. So that's my segue into saying what you remember at that time and how theater was being made at that time in 2006, the evolution of theater making. Not, you don't have to speak, of course, on behalf of the whole country, but in your own theater making as artists in the world, directors, playwrights, producers. What has changed? Where do you feel like you have seen your playmaking and your country's theater making going? And anybody, I you jump in and moved.
So,
Okay, Sabina, how might you answer that in terms of evolution?
Yeah, Liz, could you repeat it? Your statement? Yes.
Sure. We met at a very particular time. In 2006, you were making theater in a certain way. Your collaborators were making a certain kind of theater in terms of what content, style, form. Now in 2021, we're in a different place. You're in a different place, and wondering what you have seen in your work and others as an evolution in terms of how theater is being made in your circles.
Right. Well, in Mexico, it's a very lively scene, our Mexican theater. When I started writing for the theater, I was called the Mexican woman that writes for the theater in my generation. I was very lonely as a woman. Nowadays, half of the playwrights are women, half of the directors are women. That thing, the coming to the scene of women is very important in Mexico. Also, we have a less Mexico City Center theater, which is very good. Conchi is one of the, maybe she's the most brilliant example of the coming of the corners of the country to the center and spreading around the country. So Mexico is doing very well theater-wise. Now, what is the relation of Mexico to the global scene? In my case, I'm not a critic of theater, so I'm not very sure of what is happening globally, but I know that I'm opening plays all around Latin America. My latest play has been staged in 13 countries, including Brazil. But we think of ourselves still as a world apart from the English-speaking world, or at least that's what I feel. Netflix and the other apps have integrated many playwrights to their work, and that is very important in the sense that, yes, we're crossing the geographic lines very easily, but I'm still surprised that it's not, that the dialogue with North America is not more fluid. It's really surprising because we are neighbors. It seems that the Rio Bravo, which you call the Rio Grande, very, very eloquent. We call it the Rio Bravo, the brave river, and you call it the Rio Grande, the big. Maybe it's wishful thinking from each side. It's still very wide. I think that's a very important subject. Why is it so? Why it's not more fluid? Last week, I'm talking with HBO about a story I'm adapting, a book I'm adapting for them, for HBO International, and I asked, so in what language should it be? And they said, you write in Spanish. And I said, okay, but there are parts in LA. A third part of the book happens in North America. And they said, oh, that's in English. I said, okay. And they told me, but you know, this guy you have, that's an Australian CEO, we want him to be Spanish. And he said, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, but in what language do I write? And they told me, again, write in whatever you want. Anyway, it's going to be translated doblaje. How do you say that in English? It's going to, actors are going to talk over it, doblaje. And that fluidity, I wish we could get to that in the theater, because still theater is like the essence of drama. You cannot compare theater to movies or to Netflix. It's not the same. It's the theater where the playwright and the actor are completely alive, and it's the essence. That's the most antique art, and it's also the most present in the two sense of the word present. So I wish, yes, we could talk more of why it's not more fluid and what can we make to make it more fluid, this interchange across El Rio Grande or El Rio Bravo.
Thank you, Sabina, and that's a great question to tee up, I think, for the conference over these next couple of days, and then also in Mexico City to see if we can find answers to that question of how we can bravely cross that big brave river and have more collaborations as we all want to do. And I'm curious, Sylvia, your answer to that question, or add some more questions of your own in terms of where you sit today with your theater making and how you see work in Mexico having evolved. And if you have any answers to Sabina's question, love to hear that too.
Well, no answers. Her questions are very important for our theater, and I agree with her in many senses. No, so no answers. No, I have questions too, the same, and others. No, because I think I was reading for other reasons a book called Cultural Code, and it's very interesting because it's written for marketing. But there are very subtle cultural codes that are part of these questions. I mean, it's not only the language, but it's how, as you were saying, Liz, how do we conceive theater in every country, in every region. And I have found in North America, in Canada, I know less. I'm not very familiar with that, but in the US, the parcels by the origins or the ethnic you belong to is very strong, and I have found that very weird, very strange. I have like, how can I do that? Because yes, you are translated and you are read, or you get a production or something, but the judgment is there. I wrote a play about Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes in Spanish. I love those poets, and that's why I wrote about them. And I was questioned in the US, why you being a Mexican, not being American, not being English, write about, well, I said, because I can, because I want and I can, because in Mexico, then that's what I love here in theater. You can write about anything you want, about any subject, any person, any character, and I love that. And I think that has led us to enrich our playwriting. And also, what I find different now from the 2006 theater is a lot of playwrights and directors and actors from all over the country in Mexico are moving around. Now with the pandemic, it has stopped a little bit. Moving around, I mean, the mobility that we have now in Mexico, in all the nation, is big. For example, Conchi, as Sabina said, is here in many places, but also the productions travel in Mexico a lot. And also we travel abroad. And that's very, very important. Before it was less, no? So the mobility around the world, I think, has also is a difference.
Thank you.
And in my, see, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Conchi.
Thank you, Conchi. Nice to see you.
Yes, so good to see you.
She left right as I was going to ask her the question. It sounds like, just to say, not to speak for Conchi, but I'm just wondering, you know, you both referenced moving around the country much more now, and Sabina, you mentioned Conchi being her and her plays and her working everywhere. If there's anything you might like to add in terms of the work that she's been making recently, or maybe what she's working on, just to give we didn't get to hear from her as much, to maybe say a little bit about what she might be doing that's been so powerful in the country.
Well, in Mexico, we have a mythification of the Indian, as in many places. And Conchi just started to do these plays that are happening in this, what we call the Indian part of the country, which is, first the thing she told us is, it's not Indian, it's mestizo. So stop talking about us as Indian. We are mestizos just as you are. Next development is, start talking about us like if we were living in another century. We're not. We're in the same century. We see TV. We have iPhones. So stop doing that. But yes, we're different. We're still different. In Yucatan, we dress different. We eat different. We have a different humor. And wow, we're feminists too. And that is so refreshing. And she's been very successful because of that, because you go and see her plays, and a new world which is not really completely different than ours opens up with a lot of authenticity. She doesn't play to the audience, she's just authentic. So she's been very successful. And she's a very good playwright. I haven't said that, because all that is like very nice and good, but she's very effective on stage. Mm-hmm.
You, Mark.
That is, I have a quick question for Sabina and Sylvia. Is Mestiza Power still done, performed a lot?
I don't know. I saw it in El Teatro Helénico, and I loved it. Then I invited Conchi to work with me, because she's a wonderful actress or actor. No, in English you say she's a wonderful actor. She's a wonderful actor too. So I don't know, Sylvia.
I remember
Well,
Sylvia?
yeah, thank you. I think you were going to talk. Yes, I think Sabina is still somewhere playing from time to time, but Conchi now has a play also with Mayan traditions about baptism. I have not seen that play, but I think it's very interesting. And also she has this work about biographical play that is Hija de Cachorro de León, no?
Yeah, that's great.
It's a wonderful monologue, very.
It's a monologue done by her.
Yeah, very deep, and that was now with the evolution of theater on the screens. For the screens, I saw that an adaptation for Zoom, and was very good also for the screen. Very well adapted, very well performed. And so, but I think Mestiza Power is still from time to time here or there. So, del manantial del corazón, yes. Yes, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, well.
No, I remember seeing it, and it had such power and operated on so many different levels in terms of the daily rights of the Mayan women, and on this whole other level, I kept remembering the sensory power of it. There's the play, there's the language, the extraordinary acting. There was also the sensory dimension of it as well, of the washing of the hair and all of that, and the smell. It was just profoundly theatrical. She's an extraordinary artist. I know we need to switch to the Q&A at this point. Thank you, everyone, for your extraordinary contributions. Wonderful. At a 15-year distance, at a 15-year mirror, that is never easy. You've been very kind to share and to stay with us in this way, and the audience as well, all very kind to listen. So I know Amanda and Jay have been collecting questions that they will field and share with us. Please.
Hello,
We have
my name
12
is
minutes,
Jihei.
probably.
I'm one of the volunteers
Jihei.
for LMDA conference. So we have one question from Martin K. Green Rogers. What do you think is the future of collaborations across the borders, with time, money, and other things being a potential obstacle? I'm going to repeat one more time. What do you think is the future of collaboration across borders, with time, money, and other things being a potential obstacle?
Well, if
Thank you,
time, money, and other things are the obstacle, we're very far away. They should be time, money, and other things should be vehicles. When it can happen very easily. That's what I think.
Any other panelists? Oh.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that our next panel, in fact, addresses, I will probably address some of those issues in terms of Mexico and Canada and the dramaturgical collaborations between the two countries, which are small and very modest at the moment, because, as I said earlier, the gap between the Canadian border and the Mexican border is indeed grand and has so many obstacles in it, and has been very hard to surmount at all. I think I would say that there are more connections and contacts internationally for Canadian artists now than there ever have been. Not nearly as many of those are links to Mexico or Central and South America, and that is a huge absence in the work here. Not only the collaborations, but the presence of productions of work by any artist from almost any of those countries are almost completely absent in Canada. Which goes down to the timidity of our producers and theaters largely, and also the conviction by Canadian artists over the last 30 years to produce Canadian work in the face of, let's be honest, the huge amount of British and American work that was on our stages. So we are still dealing with that. and more currently about prioritizing work by indigenous artists from these lands and from diverse artists from so many places that live and work in Canada. All of those are realistic barriers, unfortunately, to seeing more work by Mexican and Central American artists on our stages yet.
I would like to add something. I had an experience at Calgary. They call me and they say they want to stage between Pancho Villa and a naked woman. And I said, really? At Calgary? Okay, fine, great. So they stage it. I go there. And I'm surprised. I'm still surprised. Why are they doing this? And the producers, and they have a big, big theater. First night, it's completely full. And then I understand. Half of the theater, the less expensive tickets, all were Mexicans. Calgary receives many, many temporary workers every year. So that was the public, and the other public were those Canadians that had the necessity to understand from where these guys were coming. So I found that very intelligent producing. I thought the producer was very intelligent and he was very successful. Tati mentioned there are millions of immigrants from our countries, one way to the other. That's something I don't know if it's taking in if producers are watching this phenomenon.
Also, to Martine's
Liz?
question, yeah, to Martine's question, I also wonder if there's a pandemic silver lining in some of this too, in terms of now these conversations that are happening as we're having now with technology, that we're able to meet, be introduced to, see work across all borders. If you have access to technology, that we're able to collaborate in new ways or find each other in new ways or continue connections in new ways that we couldn't when with the expense of travel or when we weren't able to travel. Or so I wonder, in terms of time and money and other things, Martine, if maybe somehow what we learned through this last year can connect each other to a wider circle of collaborators to start new projects.
Yeah, we've got another question I'd love for us to get to before we finish. I'm Amanda.
Amanda?
I'm one of the volunteers. Considering you got to see a dream as great as this reunion come true, what does everyone in this gathering wish for when you think of the future?
Sylvia, you should close your eyes and dream what you see.
Well, now I think, well, for me, it's important that the future brings more theater. I mean, now that with the pandemic, the theaters are closed and we are beginning to come back, for me, the nearest future, I hope we have theaters full of people as in Calgary, you know, it's what I wish for. But I think coming to from the other question too, I would like to say that festivals are a huge bridge to make that place circulate. So if there will be more festivals that bring Mexican plays to Canada and to other countries. So I would like to see a future with more bridges, but not only individual or little groups, but huge, like maybe festivals. I think it's not easy to develop a festival, but it's a way to make place move around, you know? And yes, I see. I am optimistic. So let's have more theater.
All right, we have 1 minute left. We have time for perhaps we have time for one question. Anyone want to jump in with a last minute comment or I think this has been a terrific event, but I wanted to say one last thing. This whole question about the future, I think, I started off from this place of that we had curiosity. What do I want in the future? Well, I want us to get to a place where we of course we always have curiosity. We must have curiosity. Someone just said, I think it was Sylvia, we need more festivals. When you think about 15, 16 years ago, my God, and borders and walls, the digital, what it has done, unfortunately, has broken down so many walls. And the whole notion of, I have seen probably 50, 60 productions in the last year or two that I would never have seen. I just simply would not have seen. Unfortunately, I've seen them now, and we'll have seen festivals and everything. It's incredible what's happened, and so my curiosity continues to happen. It will always happen, and that's our greatest trait as artists: is curiosity. We must never let that die. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you out there who watched us, listened to us. We're grateful to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the conversation. It was really nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's a wonderful
Bye-bye.
reunion.
Silvia, Sabina,
Thank you,
Liz,
Brenda, colleagues.
Mark, Brian, and Conchi, who left early. Thank you for a great panel. And everyone, we will be seeing you very soon in 15 minutes for the Canadian-Mexican Artist Exchange. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Oh.